From the author of Spinsterella, The Strange and Unusual Romance and Spellbound, A Darker Shade of Black, comes the legendary Magic Tilda. Pick up the conclusions of the Spinsterella trilogy in paperback and e-readers this Halloween. I've been studying the behavior of many veteran comics creators online, and the behavior of many veterans comics creators online is extremely disturbing and downright unprofessional. When I look at the behavior of guys like your Mark Waid, Kurt Busiek, and Dan Slott online, it is extremely unprofessional, and any person who works in a business setting would have called those guys into their office to have a discussion with them. Unfortunately, because these guys work in the comic book industry, no one has checked them on their extremely unprofessional behavior on social media. Now, when it comes down to these comics creators, they feel like they can go out here and disagree with people, and then if people disagree with them, they can go block them and then use block bots. Some of them argue with people online, and all of this behavior is extremely unprofessional when you are an employee of a company like a Marvel Comics or a DC Comics, because when you are a writer who works for a company like a Marvel Comics or a DC Comics, you are the face of the characters you represent. You are a face in the company, and you are a representative of that company. When you behave unprofessionally, it gives people a negative image of your company and a negative image of your product. And it does not give customers an incentive to go out here and buy your product if they see you arguing with fans or doing things like blocking fans, or some extreme behaviors like going out here to dox fans like the YouTuber Diversity in Comics, or making threats to attack a YouTuber like a Diversity in Comics, because this type of behavior shows that you have an extremely thin skin. And when it comes down to people who work in the publishing industry, like myself, we know that you cannot have a thin skin and be in this business. Because I look at the behavior of your Mark Waids, your Dan Slotts, and your Kurt Busieks, and it really is quite disturbing to me to see these guys who have more years in the publishing business than I have this thin skin. Because when you are in the publishing business, you have to develop a thick skin very early, and then you have to keep that thick skin and maintain that thick skin if you hope to have any sort of career in trade publishing at all. Because if you come into trade publishing with a thin skin, you are not going to survive. And when people see you going back and forth with people like comic fans online because they don't like your comic, that shows how you have a really thin skin, and it shows how unprofessional you are. Now, I've been on social media for about 7 or 8 years, and I've had to deal with all sorts of criticism regarding blogs I have written over the past decade and many books I have written over the past decade. And over that time, I have had to develop a thick skin, and I developed that thick skin starting out when I started doing query letters for books like the Cassandra Cookbook, which got over 400 rejections, and then books like The Temptation of John Haynes, which got over 500 rejections. When it comes down to trade publishing, you learn to develop a thick skin very early on, because people just aren't going to like what you write. People are going to disagree with the ideas that you have regarding the stories you have, and you just learn how to take it and move on. Eventually, you get to the point where what people are saying about you doesn't even faze you. Because I've been online for many years with many different stories, and I've gotten to the point where things don't even faze me anymore. Now, I've heard from some people online who have said I should have a larger web presence, and I should have something like 10,000 subscribers or more, because so many people have been talking about me over the years, and they've been talking about the books I produce and the blogs I have produced over the years. However, I understand that because people are talking about me, I have to maintain some sort of professionalism when interacting with the public. And when you're having people talking about you online, you have to understand that there are people who are going to like you, and then there are going to be people who don't like you. And if there are people who disagree with you, you have to just learn how to brush it off. I understand that they have a right to their opinion, they have a right to their points, and I just have to just take it and move on. That's part of the business. Part of the business is you're going to deal with reviewers who don't like your comic. You're going to have to deal with things like one-star reviews on Amazon.com. And what you do is you have to learn how to brush those off and keep it moving. I've had several of my books where one person, well, like a single mother, was really mad, and she left a one-star review on a book, Isis: Trial of the Goddess. And then I had the Night of the Vampires book where somebody left a spam one-star review, and I just had to brush that off and keep it moving. And I also had someone who just decided they didn't like the Cassandra Cookbook, which I published back on 2008 with a POD company, decide they were going to go and roast that book up because one of the characters was a down low homosexual, and because I presented the down low homosexual as a bad guy, they were upset over the fact that this down low character was not presented as some sort of victim, but some sort of villain. And I was writing the story the way I wanted to write it, but they didn't like it, so they roasted the book up. And I just had to take that and move on. And what I did with that Cassandra Cookbook, when it failed to catch an audience, is I repackaged it as a recipe for success, and it became one of the best-selling books at SJS Direct when I first started the company. And that's what you have to do in many cases, because you cannot take people's opinions and let them be a part of you or let them affect you emotionally. And when I look at guys like your Mark Wades, your Kurt Busicks, and your Dan Slots, they're letting people's opinions affect them, and they're letting them affect the quality of their writing. When I look at your Mark Wade, this here was a man who wrote one of the greatest Flash stories of all time, Return of Barry Allen. He wrote a classic in Kingdom Come, and it's sad to see this man who has written so many great comic book stories allow himself to fall apart later on in his career, especially on social media. He should have the resolve to be able to know how to deal with criticism from fans, the resolve to deal with opinions from fans, and the resolve to deal with differences of opinions and different critiques. But unfortunately, we see this guy on social media, and he just turns into Mr. Emotional, and that doesn't really reflect well on him, because as an elder statesman in the comic book business these days, you would think he would be a voice of reason, a voice of professionalism, someone talking to other younger people in the business and telling them, you know, you need to know how to behave online. You need to understand that your online presence is a reflection of you and a reflection of how you are represented online. This is something I understood very early in my career, even when I started publishing the first Isis with Print on Demand Company back in 2002. I understood that not only is the book a representation of me, but my online presence is a reflection of how I behave. And I understand that when I am online, I have to present a very professional image to people, and I have to maintain that professional image even if I am disagreeing with people. Recently, I had someone come to my YouTube channel who said that they wanted to buy my books, but they got upset because one of the books I wrote as related to my men's issues catalog, The Misadventures of Captain Save-A-Ho, was offensive to her because I used the word ho. Now, I explained why I used that word in the title, because the title was meant to sell to as many readers as possible. And Captain Save-A-Ho is a title that everyone knows. Everyone knows that title from the song, so that was the reason why the title was on the book. It had nothing to do with the degradation of black women, and it had nothing to do with the degradation of women in general. And most people, men and women, understood this who read the book. And as a writer and a publisher, I tried to handle the situation as professionally as possible, and I tried to explain the situation to this customer, and I tried to maintain good customer relations. This is something that many in the comic book industry don't understand, is that even if customers disagree with you, you have to remain professional in the way you handle things. You cannot allow people to affect how you do business. Part of professionalism is learning how to listen, and when it comes down to many comics creators, they have a hard time listening to people because many live in an echo chamber. And when it comes down to many of these social justice warriors who have entered into the comic book industry, they need a crash course in how to maintain their professionalism. When I look at the way people like your Heather Antos and many others have been behaving online, if they were working at SJS Direct, I would be calling them into my office to discuss the way they've been behaving online, because I would not be having people doing things like doxing people or advocating the doxing of people for having differences of opinion. I would not be advocating people putting up block bots and then spying on people. That behavior is extremely unprofessional for someone who works at a publishing house. When you are working at a publishing house, the first thing you understand is that you are going to have to deal with a lot of criticism. You're going to have to deal with a lot of differences of opinion. You're going to have to deal with a lot of different viewpoints. You're going to have to deal with a lot of disagreements. And you're going to have to learn in many cases to agree to disagree, because that's all part of working in the publishing business. And people who work in the publishing business understand you have to have a thick skin in order to stay in this business, and you have to have a thick skin in order to survive in this business. And many of the SJWs who have entered this business think that you can just make comics for you, but I'm sorry, that's just not how it's done. And many of these veteran creators are not helping anything by going along with these SJWs who have entered the business, and they need to sit down and check them on their behavior, because your behavior is completely out of line for someone who works at a publishing house. When you are working at a publishing house and you are working with a catalog of commercial characters, you have to follow certain guidelines and certain standards as related to that character. And many comic fans, looking at the product that is being produced by the people who are working at Marvel and DC right now, they're looking at the product and saying, this is not the character we grew up with. Especially when we look at Marvel, who has decided to replace many popular characters like Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, and Wolverine and Spider-Man with diversity characters who really aren't about diversity. As a black creator, I can tell you what they call diversity is not diversity. It's really just about pushing identity politics and pushing a narrative that fits the SJW agenda. And when I look at those characters, they're just not quality versions of what we got. What people want are the originals. The originals are what they identify with, what they relate to. But your Marvel, sadly, continues to double down, and that's why their sales hit an all-time low. And the bad customer service is only leading to the trend of sales going down, escalating. And that, again, has to do with people thinking that their way is the only way. And that, again, goes back to the leadership at Marvel, your Axel Alonso and Tom Brevoort, who are not taking a leadership role at this company in regards to policies regarding social media and maintaining standards as related to the Marvel Comics catalog. When I look at the books that are coming out of Marvel, they are clearly far below the standards of what Jim Shooter established and Tom DeFalco established. When I look at these comics that are coming out of Marvel, they're extremely poor quality, and the reason why they're extremely poor quality is because many of your editors and creators are spending so much time on social media bickering and arguing with fans instead of focusing on honing their craft. As a creator myself, who has only a certain number of hours in a day, I can tell you I do not have a lot of time to go back and forth with people online. When I'm at the library and I'm doing my promotion work online on social media, I spend most of my time uploading videos to promote books that are coming out, like the most recent Legendary Mad Matilda, or I'm making videos to connect with audience people to get to know me and to get to know my products. And when I'm on social media, I spend more time promoting my work and putting up new blogs so people can have content to read, or doing things like I just did recently, where I did a Legendary Mad Matilda book reading where I'm reading a couple of chapters online. I'm doing more promotion work than I am going back and forth with people, because I understand that, again, I am the face of my product, I am the face of my company, I represent my company, and I represent myself to everyone on social media. That's why I try to maintain a professional social media presence online, because when you maintain a professional social media presence online, people see you as someone they can value, someone they can trust, and see someone who is really somebody willing to stand behind their product. When they see people getting defensive online, like your Mark Waid has gotten and your Kurt Busiek have gotten, and they see you talking about politics and all sorts of issues and going back and forth with people, that doesn't really give them a reason to trust you or an incentive to go out here and buy your product. When they see you getting extremely defensive over a critique of a comic book and trying to withdraw, that doesn't give people a reason to trust you or to try to go out here and support your product. When they see a person who is a face, who is friendly, approachable, someone who can take criticism, someone who is extremely professional in taking criticism, someone who is not going to go back and forth with you, someone who's not going to try to go into ad hominem attacks because you have a different opinion, someone who isn't going to go into shaming language because you have a difference of opinion, someone who can take criticism, they'll see you as someone they can trust. They'll see you as somebody who is dependable, someone who is reliable, and someone who they believe they will feel comfortable about buying books from. This is the type of presence I try to maintain online in most of my interactions with people on social media. And I've had to deal again with people who have tried, when they disagree with me, tried to stalk me. I mean, I remember on Blogger, when I was writing men's issues blogs, I had a guy trying to stalk me from Blogger who came to Facebook looking to troll me. And I solved the problem by moderating my comment section. And when the guy tried to stalk me on Facebook, I blocked them. And I only block people, again, when they participate in extremely antisocial behaviors like ad hominem attacks, shaming tactics, or other personal attacks. I do not mind people having differences of opinion regarding my books, differences of opinion regarding my opinions, regarding different issues on many things I talk about in my blogs or in my videos. And that's part of the business, because when you are a professional writer and you present material outside to the public, that material is open for critique. And this is something that I think guys like Mark Wade and Kurt Busiek and Dan Slott don't understand, is that once you publish material, it is open for critique and it is open for criticism, and you have to be able to have a thick skin, to deal with that criticism. I've had to deal with really hard criticism from people when I wrote hardcore men's issues blogs, like Why Real Men Avoid Single Mothers. Now, I wrote this blog back in 2012, and that blog went viral twice, and several people took that blog to a radio show in Florida called Sana G Morning Show, and they tried to roast me, and they wouldn't invite me on the show to defend my work. They just decided to go off and roast it. And I also had some hoteps and pro-blacks who got mad one time when I wrote a blog saying comic books are not supposed to grow up with you, because these characters are supposed, as I see it, to remain what they are, and as you grow older, you're supposed to be able to move on if you want to move on, but that character is supposed to remain that character because that's who that character is. Because there are some people out there who thought, oh, this character is supposed to grow up with me, and I said that no, this character is this character, they are who they are, they are not going to grow up with you. You, as you get older, you're supposed to be able to move on to other things like science fiction, fantasy, and other novels, and the comic books, if you wanted to, let them go because you've outgrown them. That's just part of the growth process. And these guys got mad because I talked about comic books not growing up with you, and they decided to go on their board and attack me. And I sat there and they talked about the covers on many of my ISIS series books, because at the time I was hand drawing the covers because I didn't have any money. And I looked at that and I said, okay, these guys are saying this, and I took a lot of people's statements about the covers and I went out here and I put a cover on the book. And guess what happened when it came down to after I went out here and sold many pieces of my toy collection to have Bill Walko design the cover for ISIS Wrath of the Cyber Goddess. The same hoteps and pro-blacks were sitting there complaining about the covers, talking about the character was too light-skinned. So there is no pleasing some people, and you have to have a thick skin in dealing with certain people, and you have to do what is best for your business. And this is the sad part as related to the comic book industry, is nobody who is professional, or who are supposed to be the so-called professionals, is thinking about what's doing is what is in the best interest of the business. Everybody is thinking about themselves, but they are not thinking about the business. And as a guy who is a publisher, I understand that you have to think about the business, and you have to do what is in the best interest of the business. And when you are in business, you have to understand that if you want to sell comics today, you're going to have a social media presence, and you're going to have a professional social media presence. If people are talking about your books and they are saying things about it, you're going to have to learn how to take it and let it roll off you. I had to learn how to do that in the decade I've been writing blogs on Blogger, and I had to learn how to do that when I wrote articles for other different websites and when I go out here and publish different books. I have to learn how to take what they're saying and then move on, because that's just part of the business of being a writer. And it's sad to see that, you have guys like your Mark Wade, your Ron Mars, your Kurt Busiek, guys with over 20 years in the business, but they do not understand what professionalism is. I mean, I've been an author for about 8, 9 years, and I seem to have a better understanding of professionalism than these guys. And the sad part is, I aspired to be a comic book writer based on many of the works I have seen in comic books, and I have been inspired by comic books, and I often pay homages to comic books in many of my novels. I mean, in Spellbound, I pay homage to Ann Nocenti's Daredevil run, and in my other books, like Temptation of John Haynes, I pay homage to Tim Burton and many other creators out there, and I also pay homage to Joss Whedon in Temptation of John Haynes, and in many of my ISIS series books, I pay homage to different comics creators. What a lot of people don't know is the ISIS series was originally meant to be a comic book. I wanted to be in this business, but when I look at the way this business is being run these days, I look at it and it just makes me shake my head, because as a professional, I could not ever think about going out here and attacking fans, because attacking fans is just not something I would want to do. I mean, my fans are people I value. My readers are people I value. They're people I respect. And because I respect them, I try to maintain professionalism in my communications with them online. And I try to be as cordial as I am with them online, even if I disagree with people online. And if people are getting too personal, I know that the best thing to do is block a person who is too personal. But if a person is presenting a legitimate argument to me and legitimate facts to me regarding something in a story, and I've had that happen to me when the ISIS series book, ISIS All About the Goddess, I had a guy, he read the story, he enjoyed the story, and he showed me some grammatical mistakes in the story, and I took what he said and I went back, I corrected those mistakes, and I uploaded a brand new version of that story online. And that story right now is one of the better selling ISIS series books. And the reason why it is one of the better selling ISIS series books, again, is because I actually took the time to listen to people. And this is the big problem with many of these comics creators, is that they believe that they don't have to listen to their customers. No, you have to listen to your customers. Your customers are the ones who are paying for this product, and they deserve to be listened to, because this is their money being spent on this product, and they have a right to have a say on what that they're spending their money on. You don't get to tell them what they have to buy. And this is the big problem with your SJWs, is that they believe that they can just tell you to take their products, and that it's a one-way street. No, when it comes down to comic books or any sort of other publication, it's a two-way street. And you listen to the customer, and if the customers are telling you something is wrong, like when the customers were telling me there was something wrong with the book covers, you go and you fix the problem. You do not go out here and argue with the customer. You do not use blockbots to block the customer. You do not go and attack customers like Diversity in Comics, who have gone out of their way to actually go out here and buy these books that are often critically panned, like your America Chavez book, like your Riri Williams Iron Man book. Him actually going out here and buying that book, that's actually giving your comic some publicity, because what happens in many cases with these books is they are getting passed by and ignored on the shelf. And he's being nice enough to try to buy this book and try to help save this industry, but instead of helping him, you disrespect him, and instead of listening to these customers, including myself, who have told you Riri Williams is a bad character. I even called her, I called her Riri Crusher, because she reminds me so much of Wesley Crusher in Star Trek The Next Generation. And people tell you this, but you don't want to listen, because you don't think the customer has any value and that the customer isn't right. At SJS Direct, I always make an effort to listen to my customers. I always make an effort to listen to my readers, and I always make an effort to listen to anyone, because part of being in the business of publishing is listening. Part of being in business is listening. Business, part of customer service, is 90% listening and 10% talking. This is something I learned way back when I was working at Food Emporium back in the 1990s when I got my first job, and what I learned when I was working at City College of New York at their science library circulation desk. I learned how to listen to people because listening is a big part of business. And the sad part is you have many of these comic creators on social media and they don't know how to listen to people. They want to try to tell you what you should want and not listen to what the customer is telling you. People in the comic book business have to understand that these customer service issues are hurting the industry, and when they see people like your Kurt Busieks, your Ron Mars, your Dan Slotts, and many others out here arguing with customers, all it does is alienate other customers who are on the outside, because not only are the comic fans upset and not buying books, but people who are casuals on the outside, they see all this social media drama, and what they're saying is, I have no incentive to go out here and try these comics, because if this is the way these creators are behaving, then maybe I don't want to buy these products, because if this is the way people are behaving, then it's going to reflect on your product. Because again, your product is a reflection of you, and the way you present yourself online is a reflection of your product, a reflection of your company, and a reflection of your business. This is something I understood many years ago, and again, this is why I make sure that my online presence is as professional as possible. I've had people coming at me with ad hominem attacks, and again, those are the only ones I block. But if it's about the product and it's a constructive thing, I try to listen to that person, and I try to address that issue in a constructive manner. I would like to see more professionalism in the comic book industry, and I'd like to see more comics creators who are supposed to be older than I am trying to be statesmen in the comic book industry and presenting a positive image of comics and a positive image of comic book creators than sitting out here arguing with people on social media and presenting some of the most negative images I have seen outside of black YouTube. Now, when it comes on to black, it's the only place I have ever seen such hostile behavior is on black YouTube, where black people go back and forth with each other, where they're arguing, roasting people, dropping documents on people, because that's what doxing is. You're dropping a document on someone. That's the type of ghetto behavior I've seen on black YouTube, and it's sad that I see the same unprofessional, crazy behavior happening right here online with comics YouTube and the comic book industry. I want to see things get better, and I want to see companies like Marvel and DC really start getting together and working on a policy as related to social media, because social media is a place where these creators are not just representing themselves, they're representing these iconic characters like Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, the Hulk, and representing the companies that publish their works. If you'd like to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon by clicking the link in the description box. And if you want to try some of the SJS Direct titles like the ISIS series, the E-Steam series, The Temptation of John Haynes, or any of my Men's Issues books, you may do so by clicking the link to Amazon.com. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.